The issues affecting you. Revealed, explained, discussed. Now on WGAL 8 in Focus.
Hello, I'm Susan Shapiro. A proposed constitutional amendment that would allow child sex abuse survivors in Pennsylvania a 2-year window to go to court against their abusers will not appear on the May 18th primary ballot. That's because the Department of State failed to properly advertise the amendment, and that caused the Secretary of State to resign. Tonight, we'll talk to a state representative who's a child sex abuse survivor about what lawmakers can do now. And you'll hear Attorney General Josh Shapiro's reaction and what he has heard from other child sex abuse survivors as we bring the fight against child sex abuse in focus. The Department of State said on February 1st it failed to advertise the amendment because of human error. Under the state constitution, after first passage, the wording of a proposed constitutional amendment must be advertised in 2 newspapers in every county in each of the 3 months before the next general election, at which members of the General Assembly are elected. This advertising did not occur as required in the lead up to the 2020 general election. The department offered a sincere apology to the victims impacted by the error. It says it has instituted new controls to ensure that such failings will not occur in the future, including tracking of all constitutional amendments from the time they are filed and direct notifications to additional department staff when they are signed, along with cross-checks to ensure all required steps are carried out. Secretary of State Kathy Boockvar also resigned effective February 5th. I'm joined now by Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you.
What was your reaction when you heard what had occurred?
Disbelief, disgust. I think the conduct or lack thereof at the Department of State was truly shameful. I feel horrible for these victims. In fact, the first thing I did was get on a Zoom with many of the victims across the Commonwealth to just talk to them, listen to them, cry with them, and plot our strategy going forward to make sure this gets done. I told them, and I'll tell you and the people of Pennsylvania, I will never, ever quit on these victims. And while the conduct at the Department of State was truly shameful, we are going to all work together to remedy their error, to remedy their conduct, and make this right for victims all across Pennsylvania.
All right. Well, we'll talk more later about what those remedies might be. Were you satisfied with that apology and the fact that the Secretary of State resigned and the fact that they said they're going to institute further controls?
Well, I think that's probably more a question for the governor. The Secretary of State answers to him. But I will tell you, I will not be satisfied until things are made right for these survivors, until we get language passed. And I would argue it should just be passed statutorily, like a regular bill. I don't think we need to be going through this long, drawn-out constitutional amendment process. But I'll be satisfied when that's done. And these survivors, those abused, have the opportunity to confront their abusers in a court of law.
This would give a 2-year window for these survivors to file any kind of legal action. Right now they can't if they're under a certain age. Is that correct?
So essentially, under our state laws today, there is a very brief period of time where someone who has been abused can confront their abuser in court. For the survivors who were outlined in the grand jury report, that time has long passed. And some folks have asked, okay, why do we need to open up a window? Why do we need to do this for the victims? And by the way, I think there are people who genuinely don't understand that process. They don't have an agenda. They just sort of want to understand. And the answer I give to them, which I'll share with you this evening here, is very simple. When you've been abused, particularly when it's been a part of institutional sexual abuse, there are long-term impacts to that. We see survivors who are battling mental health issues and drug and alcohol issues, things like that. And oftentimes to deal with that, you need to pay for counseling or services. There is a cost that's associated with that type of abuse. And we don't think that cost should be borne by the victims, by the survivors. We think instead it should be borne by the institution that was a part of that abuse. And I think that's reasonable. I think that the average person who hears this and understands this accepts that. And now what we need to do in Pennsylvania is open up that window, that opportunity for victims to confront their abusers in court and recover for the costs associated with the long-term impacts of that abuse.
And this was recommended by the grand jury.
The grand jury, when they passed their nearly 1,000-page report on, said that they really had two objectives. Number one was to make sure that the truth was finally shared. And the truth, in very brief summary, was that there were thousands of child victims, 301 predator priests, and a conspiracy and cover-up that went from dioceses here in Pennsylvania all the way to the Vatican. The second thing the grand jurors said was they wanted to make sure something like this could never happen again. And they recommended 4 legal changes to ensure that. Number one, getting rid of the criminal statute of limitations, meaning there wouldn't be a bar on me as a prosecutor to bring those charges. Number two, clarifying who in Pennsylvania is a mandated reporter and when they have to report this type of abuse. Number three, making sure that confidentiality agreements can't bar communication with law enforcement. They were oftentimes used by the church. And number four, as a way to silence victims. And number four was to open up this window. The first 3 reforms passed here in Pennsylvania. The fourth one was going through that constitutional amendment process, a process that was obviously interrupted by the conduct at the Department of State. We need to get that back on track and pass that fourth one. The final thing I'll say is this: it's important to note that this grand jury report has not only informed the actions of the Pennsylvania legislature, but legislatures across the country, from North Carolina to Colorado to our neighboring states of New York and New Jersey, have actually adopted the grand jury recommendations put forth here in Pennsylvania. And it's time that we get it done here in the Commonwealth.
Well, we'll continue our conversation and talk more about where we go from here as we move ahead.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
We continue our conversation with Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro about the Department of State's failure to advertise a constitutional amendment that would give the survivors of sexual abuse a 2-year window to go to court and have their story heard. General, where do we go from here? Can we re-advertise this, or do we have to start this whole process over again?
Well, I think we need to make sure that all options are on the table. And let me break that down in terms of what that means. Of course, the first option is to start over with a constitutional amendment process, which takes about 3 years. And for those who aren't as familiar with the constitutional amendment process, I know it can be complex. Basically, the same language needs to pass in the House and Senate in 2 consecutive legislative terms. So at its speediest, it's going to take about 3 years. That is not the preferred route. I think the preferred route is simply passing it as a bill, which requires the same language to pass in the House and Senate and go to the governor's desk for his signature. The governor's already indicated that he would sign it. The votes to pass it as a bill are clearly there in the Senate and the House. And I'm working with the leaders to see if that is a viable path forward so that we don't have to force these survivors to wait any longer.
But my understanding is initially Republicans refused to bring such a bill to the floor.
One Republican did, and he's no longer in office. Now we have a new Senate leadership, new House leadership, and I know from my conversations with them that they care about these victims and want to do right by them. And I'll let them speak for themselves in terms of what path they think is the most prudent to take.
How do you think this could help these victims? I know you said you have spoken to a number of them since this happened.
Yeah, I've spoken to dozens of the survivors, people who I've kept in close touch with since that grand jury process, people I care deeply about and want to see helped. And I will tell you, every step of the way, when they felt like they were being heard, when their truth was exposed, and when they could, speak up publicly about what happened to them, I noticed healing. And I think that healing is critically important. And so this is really the final step in the legal process, if you will, to give them the opportunity to be heard individually in court and confront their abuser. I think it's an incredibly important part of healing. And I think for the public, those who may not have been touched by this abuse, either directly or indirectly through a loved one. I think it's important in this Commonwealth that we have transparency, that we have openness, and that we know what's happening in these institutions, whether it's the Roman Catholic Church, a public school, or some other organization that has been involved in covering up the abuse of children.
And of course, there was some opposition from the Catholic Church and even the insurance industry to allow this 2-year window.
Of course. I mean, the Catholic Church has tried to shut down the investigation, silence the voice of victims, prevent the report from ever coming out. And they've been joined in this by the lobbyists for the Insurance Federation. Neither one of those organizations, I think, have any moral standing to be able to, speak out about what's best for victims. In the case of the Catholic Church, they're the ones who enabled the abuse or directly participated or covered it up. And the Insurance Federation's conduct is just absolutely shameful. It's all about dollars and cents for them. And clearly they could care less about the children who have been abused. If they did, they wouldn't have stood in the way of those children, now adults, getting the help that they need.
Well, I thank you very much for joining us and giving us your insights.
Good to be with you this evening. Thank you.
And coming up, a state representative who was a survivor of child sex abuse joins us with his thoughts on this amendment and what lawmakers can still do to get it passed.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus, coverage you can count on.
I am joined now by State Representative Mark Rozzi, who serves Berks County and is a survivor of clergy sex abuse himself. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What was your reaction to hearing that the Department of State had not properly advertised the proposed constitutional amendment?
It no doubt was shocking, disturbing, and just wondering, how could something like this slip through the cracks? And the road that we've been on since day one, we have seen so many problems arise through this process. One has to question, was this an intentional mistake, or was just an honest mistake? And from my understanding, we're going to have hearings and we'll find out exactly what happened.
The department says it was strictly human error. Do you believe that?
Well, I'll take their word for it right now, but we're still going to do our due diligence and look into it and make sure. You can't put anything past these powerful institutions out there who will do everything to protect themselves. So we will have to look into it and we can determine that later.
Many of your fellow survivors were not too keen on a constitutional amendment. In fact, I read something that Sarah Klein, who's an attorney and was a victim of Larry Nassar, said cowards in the legislature prefer constitutional change. Why did you go that route?
Well, she can say and call us names all she wants, but she's not in the process. She's a lawyer who wants to make a lot of money when these laws pass. And she is a victim, but she's still a lawyer who represents victims. She has to understand, and victims have to understand out there's a process. And if you can't get the votes to pass it statutorily, which we have tried for the last 15 years, and Representative McGeehan, before I was even to this legislature, tried this, you have to go a route that you can actually get done. So when we could get to a compromise and go the constitutional amendment path and get the votes both in the House and the Senate, that's a win. Because people like Sarah Klein and other attorneys who represent victims, they can say all they want about the statutory process. But at the end of the day, we wouldn't know if that would be constitutional anyway because of the remedies clause here in Pennsylvania. So we're going the path that we know we can get done, and that is constitutional. Because if we got to the end and we passed that statutory and it was ruled unconstitutional, that would be absolutely devastating for victims, and we can't do that.
So are you saying that's not the path you'll take now to try to pass a statute, that you still want to go the constitutional amendment route?
We have two options right now, and one is if we could get the votes to do it statutorily, which they have never been there in the Senate, so I wouldn't expect that they're going to be there now, or we can go the emergency constitutional amendment route and still get this on the ballot by May 18th. Now, when I pulled my amendment last week off of Senate Bill 2, I got an agreement out of the House with the House Majority Leader, Kerry Benninghoff, that he will run the constitutional emergency amendment and we can get it out of the House and we'll get it over to the Senate. Now, we don't know what exactly the Senate is going to do at this point. We know that the president pro temp and the majority leader Ward is going to caucus their members and ask them, where they are on this. And we'll have a better understanding probably moving into next week where we're going to be at. But listen, if the Senate wants to run a statutory bill, be my guest. We've been trying to do that for years. We just have to figure out a way to be able to get this done. And if that means it's the emergency constitutional amendment route, so be it.
All right, well, stay with us, Representative Rozzi. We'll talk more about the other bills you have in mind and how this has taken its toll on your life.
Thank you.
This is WGAL 8 in Focus. Coverage you can count on.
State lawmakers have passed and are working to pass several measures aimed at getting justice for child sex abuse survivors. A law signed in 2019 abolished Pennsylvania's criminal statute of limits on child sex abuse, extended a timeline for victims to sue their abusers, and extended civil statute for victims ages 18 to 24 to age 30. Extended criminal statute for criminal proceedings for victims ages 18 to 24 for 20 years. And the Pennsylvania House passed a bill on January 27th that would create that 2-year window for child sex abuse survivors to file civil suits against their abusers and against private and public institutions. That bill is on its way to the state Senate. And I'm joined again by Representative Mark Rozzi, who represents Berks County and is a survivor of child sex abuse. Again, how does this law that has been passed by the House differ from what this constitutional amendment would do?
Well, the two bills are exactly the same. The only difference is the process. And again, the constitutional amendment would have to be passed through the House and Senate twice and then go on ballot referendum, where if we would pass it statutorily, it could go through the House and Senate and signed by the governor. So the bills are exactly identically alike, except the process is a little bit different here. And we believe that going the constitutional amendment route, that we would have a means to an end that would be constitutional. And that's what the survivors want here. They want to be able to go to a court of law, find out the truth, sue the perpetrator, sue the institution if they covered it up, and find out the truth about what happened. And they deserve that.
What about that in terms of your life, the truth, as you say it? A lot of people may not know your story, but you were abused as a 13-year-old, if I'm not mistaken. What does that mean to you to get to the truth?
Well, I've been suffering and fighting for so long for the truth. And for victims and people like myself, it just gives us a hope that we would be able to move forward and put things in the past and be able to live our lives without constantly looking back. I mean, for me, I still suffer every day. I'm in this process. I hear from hundreds of victims throughout the week, not only from Pennsylvania, but throughout the United States. And, I wake up every morning, and every day I go into the shower, I'm reminded that a priest raped me in the shower. And that's how my day starts every day. And it's without fail. And it's a battle, and it's a fight from the first minute that I wake up. But then eventually you have to change gears, and you go on with your day, and you hope that you don't go backwards into those dark spots. And that's why I constantly say we need to shine a light on this, because it's very easy for victims to go back in those dark spots where they're constantly being pushed by legislators, by the church, these other institutions. We just want the truth, and they need to come out and give us that truth.
And how does the ability to go to court at that 2-year window help things?
Well, the key thing is and victims say this over and over, this is not about the money. This is about gaining access to records. And that's why the Catholic Church is fighting us so hard on this. Even though they handed over documents already for the statewide grand jury report, there's other documents that we would have access to. And these documents would most likely just spell out how the bishops aided and abetted. And there's probably not one bishop in Pennsylvania that would be protected. And that's why they're fighting so hard. They don't want us to get these other documents that will show the true cover up and how much they really knew. I mean, my priest was at 12, 13 different parishes before he came to my parochial school. And then they sent him to a sexual abuse rehab center in Jimenez Springs, New Mexico. And then they put him back in the circulation in the Amarillo Diocese, where he abused another 12 children. We put his total abuse numbers about 200 children that he violated. So we'll find out all the details about exactly what the bishops knew, and that's what we want.
And just very quickly, Representative, what has this done to your faith?
No doubt it's a battle that you still want to have faith, you still want to believe, but it is so hard because of the hypocrisy that comes out of the Catholic Church leaders and how they preach from the pulpit and say as I do as I say, not as I do. It has shattered it. And it's something that, you know, when you're raised Catholic, it's something that is missing from your life, that was just stripped away from you from the church, and how they behaved and what they did to cover this up, and how they treated you as a victim by just wanting to throw you out on the curb and like you were trash, because they would never go out of their way to help you or give you the truth. We have to take the truth from them. And that's what this is all about, is holding them accountable. They may not like it. Other people who support some of these institutions may not like it, but we will know the truth.
Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry for what you have gone through, and applaud you continuing this fight.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you for joining us for WGAL 8 in Focus. For all of us at WGAL, I'm Susan Shapiro. And join us again next Saturday night at 7 o'clock for WGAL 8 in Focus after NBC Nightly News.